Hi guys, in today's video I'm going to be looking at India, which is in the development section in Unit 1, and it's the very final section, and it looks at the challenges facing India and India's international role. So I'm just going to run through some of these issues and problems. Now if you want this board with these on, then you'll find it on my Instagram account, which is GCSE Geog Support. So make sure you go and follow me there to get all of the boards, and also please make sure that you press the buttons at the bottom and like and subscribe. So let's have a look at the challenges first of all facing India. So the biggest challenge, I suppose, is the fact that India has a population of 1.3 billion and growing. It doesn't have a one-child policy like China has, and it doesn't look like it's trying to curb its population growth. So a lot of these issues come from the fact that there's such a high population and such a high rural population which is living in poverty, which we'll get to in a minute. So first of all, India has an issue with a lack of infrastructure. It has limited electricity around the country, especially in rural regions, not so much in urban. But if any of you have watched some of the Kevin MacLeod Slumming It videos, which I would very, very much recommend, you can find them on YouTube. You can find one of them in 3 parts. It talks here about how there's only electricity in certain regions, and the slum areas of Dharavi definitely don't have an awful lot of reliable electricity. Water shortages are an issue as well. Again, in those videos it talks about how water's only available for a couple of hours in the morning and then it gets turned off. And rural areas, there's issues with clean water supply because a lot of the rivers and waterways have been contaminated. So huge issues with infrastructure within India that the government isn't able to sort out. Poor education as well, especially in the rural regions and in slums. Obviously they have to pay for their education, and there's an issue with 1.3 billion people trying to be educated. Poverty is widespread, and there's a couple of figures in the book that we need to look out for, which is that 300 million Indian citizens are living on less than $1 a day, which is, very, very high levels of poverty. And also some of the reasons for that is that TNCs, although there's lots of TNCs in the section before this section, it talks about TNC investment and the fact that we've got outsourcing, etc. by BT. The problem is that lots and lots of these TNCs don't pay taxes, and the government tried to give them incentives by lowering the tax rates to try to get them to come to India and to Mumbai and other places. But actually, those lower tax rates mean that the government don't have enough money from those taxes to put into these infrastructure projects. So it's a bit of a vicious circle in some ways, that in order to attract those TNCs, the Indian government had to reduce taxes, but by reducing taxes, you don't allow the government to then spend money on improving infrastructure for water and electricity and education, etc. So there are some of the challenges facing India if it really wants to rise, to the status maybe of a superpower, is the fact that it's got a massive, massive population and real issues trying to provide basic needs for many of them. Now, secondly, we're going to look at the position of India on the world stage in terms of being a power, and we've got some pros and cons here. So on the plus side, it is a member of the G20, and that means that it does sit at a table with America and the European countries and China and Brazil, and it does get to meet with other people, other representatives and ambassadors from those countries, and maybe talk about trade deals, possible trade deals, possibly talk about how it can improve its agriculture, how it can reduce its carbon footprints, etc., etc. So being a member of the G20 is a positive for India. Obviously, it has the next 2 are about outsourcing and FDI investment. So it does have links with many European and American companies, which obviously bring a lot of investment. We said before the negatives of that, but on the positive side, it does have these links with the international community. It's got outsourcing from companies like BT. It's got lots of financial institutes, law firms, IT firms, etc. So it has got lots of tertiary employment and tertiary companies and quaternary even within the big cities, so that is a positive. And the World Bank, not only did it used to lend money from the World Bank, but now it pays into the World Bank, and the World Bank obviously lends money to other places, so it is involved in being, I suppose from a humanitarian aspect to a certain extent, it's involved in lending money to other countries to help them develop. So that's a positive from a political point of view. for India. So there are its four positives of its world position, but it does have some negatives, and those basically include its relationships with its nearest neighbour to the west, which is Pakistan. Now, some of you might know about the issues with Kashmir, which is a disputed region between India and Pakistan, but its relations there are very frosty and worse than frosty, and it spends a lot of its money on military interventions there and making sure that it stays safe from any incursions from the Pakistan side of Kashmir. So much of its money is going into providing military support in that region to make sure that it stays stable. So that's a negative. And also it's got a lot of water issues with Kashmir as well. India at the moment is looking at maybe damming some of those rivers, and obviously if it dams the rivers leading over to Pakistan, then Pakistan won't have enough water to irrigate its crops that it needs to feed its people. So that's going to lead to greater conflict. So there are some issues with relations between India and Pakistan. So that is the challenges and the international role of India.